me tell you about 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge.
Even if it was the band cutting teeth and getting their bearings on their debut, My Chemical Romance's talent still was shown in sparks, and it's no surprise that following the album's tour, they became signed to Reprise Records in 2003. On top of that, the group both brought Frankie more into the recording process while seeing their initial drummer, Matt Pellissier, off after it was over. Seriously, he's not even in the first single's music video. It was his replacement, Bob Breyer. It's ironic because amidst this, the band made a record that both nourishes some of its ideas the group was working with before, while diving deeper into bigger hooks that propel the personal holes the album weaves together that get dove deeper into on subsequent releases a brighter spotlight to shine in. It is also a record that was successful then, and I'd argue should, if not be, recognized as one of the best albums of its era, along with being my favorite album from the band. It's the sophomore transition for My Chemical Romance that is the classic that turns 20 today, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge.
So, weird fact about myself, I've kind of convinced myself that I have some form of synesthesia, and it stems from an experience where there was a period for like a couple of months, or at least for like a period of time, whenever I would hear the song I'm Not Okay, I would smell the chocolate Pop-Tarts I used to make in 7th grade when that song and this album were popping off. And I love this album. I think that it still has this compelling narrative through line that connects Gerard's reflections on life and tributes to people in his life through this other fictional sort of narrative that gets painted and kind of gets illustrated more, especially on the second half of this record. But like, there's a lot of fun writing on this as a whole. Like, it's got its bangers. Helena is this painful, grief-filled classic. It feels like the sort of starting on death that the record is catapulted with before going into this more narrative style throughout Give 'Em Hell, Kid. And one of my personal favorite cuts of the band, You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison, the sort of dramatic songwriting that crops up on To the End, that's a real anthem-style song, but has this sort of theatricality that bleeds really well into You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison, which I think is done masterfully. That song is a banger and goes into another one of my favorite jams, I'm Not Okay. You know, I think that, like, as far as a punk record that is incredibly well sequenced, 3 Cheers is absolutely that, you know. When talking about barn burners, though, I mean, Helena's hook, colossal. I'm Not Okay's hook, like, that is some infectious shit there, and I love how the gravitas of Ghost of You is just sort of excelled even farther by the killer hook of that song. And even the other stuff on the other side, while maybe not as, you know, high profile as some of the other stuff on the A side, like, Thank You for the Venom has an incredible hook. It is a catchy-ass song. I think that the second half does a good job at building upon, you know, what those bangers are kind of alluding to, with some more just straight-laced, narrative-driven songwriting. That kind of gets teased a bit with the Jet Set Life Is Gonna Kill You after Ghost of You, which, like, the pacing after that, you know, I'm Not Okay into Ghost of You is this sort of swerve, but I think works excellently, because the Ghost of You is just a really painful song that, after following what feels like this sort of confessional and I'm Not Okay into this painful, anguish-driven song that then goes into the Jet Set Life Is Gonna Kill You, a song that more overtly talks about excess in life and how it will be one's downfall. It almost feels like the B-side of an A conversation that kind of feels like it's trading off between these handful of songs. You know, it reaches this intensity of that song and this sort of revelation across it, you know, that this life of excess is going to lead to your downfall. And I love how that song also expertly sort of weaves what the record's mood is from a narrative perspective into Gerard's own sort of autobiographical writing. You know, it's writing creatively within this that I think is just fantastic. You know, theatricality in rock music I don't feel like was low at all in the 2000s. You know, you had Muse popping off around this time. Coheed and Cambria were popping off at around this time, especially when it comes to like big bands who do big concepts. But like the storytelling on this and like the sort of illusions and inspirations it pulls from feel like they're cut from a similar cloth, but just focus all of that into this lightning bolt of an experience, because like even with an interlude that I feel like sort of further cements the listener into this feeling of an experience, like a theatrical experience. The way that it goes into Thank You for the Venom, another just getting you right back into the energy, almost into the action, you know, because from there you've got Hang 'em High, you know, you've got this sort of other side of the conversation matching the energy of the Jet Set Life. At least that's how it reads on listen, in my opinion. Before going into Hang 'em High, this, again, action-driven sort of song, kind of like You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison, but much more bombastic on the energy, while I think there's a good hook and You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison. I feel like the energy is definitely more palpable on Hang 'em High. That gets even more dramatic, you know, throughout. It's not a fashion statement, it's a death wish, where the, you know, the love aspect is driven more home with that in the next couple of songs with Cemetery Drive and I Never Told You What I Do for a Living. You know, while this A&B conversation feels like it's swept up between two individuals.
You know, there's kind of a march to Cemetery Drive following the death of the lover in the conversation that helps drive that emotion even further home.
You know, the album starts with this pain on Helena, but it feels more deep-seated before going into the other side of the coin on this.
To help round out the record. You know, it's bookended in grief and death, but from a very different place.
I love how big the ending feels, and I think that, like, while I feel like somebody has to have made the statement that the album looks front-loaded, I don't think that that's the case whatsoever. I don't know. I think that this album is fantastic as a whole, you know. I think that, and that's no knock to Bob Breyer, who was the drummer after Matt Pellicer left, but like Matt's drumming on here is just full of energy. Like, I love Bob's drums, and I think he adds to the very theatrical side that this band plays with, and I think that he does play the punk stuff really fucking well, but I consider it kind of like a Ron Welty scenario in The Offspring. Like, when he's backing the band, you can tell, and like Matt's drums, for as sort of straightforward as they could have come across in a punk sense, I do think that his fill work is great. I think that he does have a good energy. Just the way that his drums are played fits the razor-sharp delivery that this album has to a T, and I love that about it. Like, I think that, like, they, you know, build upon some of the theatrical elements from their debut in A Good Sophomore in this, while keeping some of that sharpness in the sound. Like, I respect the Stadium Rock stuff, and I like the punkier stuff that crops up over the next couple of records, but there's like a magic here where they're like doing what other bands had been doing in years prior, maybe to some capacity, but in a way that feels newer. It feels better harnessed here than I think it was in the Black Parade. While the Black Parade doubles down and dips further into both avenues that this album does, and it feels like that's what makes this the proper transition as an album, I think that it still stands above, if only because, like, it's got its theatricality, it's got its themes, it's got its personal stuff, but it's a little leaner. I think that like, the genre stuff on the Black Parade is cool, and I'm not going to turn this into a whole list of reasons why I like this more than the Black Parade, but, like, I do like the Black Parade a lot. I think that it is also a classic in its own regard, and I love where it nurtures the aspects of Three Cheers on both the punkier and theatrical side of things. I think the songwriting on that album is magnificent. I think that it is really strong in its emotion, and I love where Gerard decides to sort of pivot the listener emotion-wise. But I think that there's just an A and B here that I think is special. And I know that I'm not the only one that sees that. I know that, like, the adoration of this record is through the roof. It's an album that is remembered fondly by many. I just wanted to throw my hat in the ring and celebrate an album that turns 20 today. happy birthday to a classic. I recently, after reevaluating my top 100 of all time, which I haven't promoted on this channel, but I did make a new top 100 favorite albums. It's linked in the description. I also, after Apple dropped their favorites of all time, did my own version of the best albums of all time with only one entry per artist, something I did not do on my top 100. While I reevaluated that list entirely and it looks different, especially in its back end, I did include another Mars Volta album. I threw a handful of other things in there from the 2010s that I would say are GOAT status. And honestly, I love both lists. So if you want like two different similar perspectives on my tastes in music, linked in the description. Either way, thank you for watching this. This album slaps. Go throw it on today, since it's its birthday. It's not a long listen, and I think that's part of its charm. Thanks for watching this. If you liked it, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. The listening log will be live tomorrow evening. I've got most of it done. I've just got a couple other reviews to kind of pull together, and then it should be live late tomorrow night. Thanks for watching this, though. I'm gonna go. I've been Valorek. You guys are good at these lesson situations, and I'll see you another day.